about your agreement. For discussion.
Okay, Dave, we're live now if he wants to check.
Justin, can you hear us now? You can send me a text or call.
It's a little bit of a delay, so I
Can
can give a minute.
can you even see us?
Oh, what's the from, the library? That's our,
Jenny Losi.
what's her name?
Jenny Losi.
Oh, Dan. Ah, okay. Oh, okay. Awesome.
I'm guessing you can't hear us or see us.
You know, which is weird
Turn it on,
because
I've got Justin trying to do the live stream.
I'm showing it live over here.
My son's.
Oh, I could look at it, how do I get to
Yeah.
You wanna
We just, I don't know if it'll make an echo though with you.
We know the audio hasn't been very good on the live stream.
You listen on the live stream.
Yeah.
Who's sitting here? Bill.
Let me call Justin, see if he got the link
Okay.
or.
Perfect. I'll send it to you, Joe.
Hey, Morty.
Good, how you doing?
You know, I'm gonna send it to you now.
It's an FYI.
I just want to go like some pages and go to the live and find
Hi,
it.
Justin.
You found this mistake.
You sent me the link in email.
Are you able to get the link up?
Right.
Everybody shared notification, push it on it. Just FYI. In case you were looking at, I don't know if you were looking
I
at
didn't
this
get,
or
I
not.
didn't get one yet. Did
So-
you send
Can you
me?
see us now?
Now you say that, I'll send it to you.
Can you see
Yes,
Sarah
Well,
also?
now that you fixed it, right? Send me a good one.
Yeah, perfect one.
And then what's on.
Can you hear us?
So we have notes in there.
Okay,
Try
I'm gonna
talking.
hang up and then try the audio.
Oh, for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Okay.
basically, right, because what I have-
Text me and let me know if you hear us. Hi, Justin, this is the test. Can you hear us? Text me and let me know.
Was he hearing anything before? Nothing.
He was having trouble getting it started.
Okay, perfect.
So.
Here's my text.
Okay, are we clear? I'm glad you can hear us. We had a problem with not being clear when we replayed it. So is it coming through real clear or is it pretty garbled?
Echo is we had troubles with.
So I want to make sure that.
So.
That's cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. As soon as- Yeah, we'll be
Garbled and echoey.
I think it's the microphone in this bounce on walls over here. Everything I'm learning is that that's our problem.
I'm sorry.
Everything that I'm seeing online is that more than likely it's using the microphones with the owl and that's making it bounce.
Okay, so
So that's what we joke about, I guess.
there's a button on the owl for the, it's got a mic indicator on it.
That mutes it and nobody can hear anything we say.
Now you hear it.
Yeah. So I think it's the fact that we're using it with both. I'm guessing. Everything I'm reading is that it bounces if you're using the owl in a big room.
We don't have anything else to try right now. Okay, Justin, we don't have anything else to try right now, so thanks for checking. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.
There's days at all. So we let me have like on your laptop.
No, because it mutes and unmutes on the owl, like I can tell, like it does, the red light comes on to the owl, and mine so shows it connected to the owl.
Oh, it's just delayed by that.
Yeah, it is related to flies.
Yeah, he's very far away though. He's not positioned like this.
But the condition.
Yes.
So wouldn't be. Definitely use somewhere. Condition. Right Yes. I've never seen that. I guess I would say more, generally. It's my
No, the owls are connected.
But there's another connection from computer to owl.
This one,
What's that one say?
This one says owl to laptop.
Okay.
Or from meeting, this one says from meeting to laptop.
Yeah.
From meeting to laptop.
From meeting owl to laptop. Okay, so that's what that one's doing, which is correct. But there's another one.
Yeah. So this one.
It's got a port from it.
That's good. Yep, thank you.
So that's what. Yep.
Two up here. One might be yours or mine. You're way back.
Yeah, so that.
Yeah.
Like we have to wait. Wait to take
Oh, yeah. I got my. Yeah. What happens when you don't work anymore? I can give it back. My country's working for everything, but notarized.
Hello, everyone. Glad you're here. We'll get started in about 1 or 2 minutes. First, I request that if you have a cell phone, please put it in silent or vibrate mode so we don't have any interruptions during our meeting. Thank you. All right, it is 7 o'clock, so I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Will you please all rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll start with roll call. Allison?
Dave Brutlog,
Here.
Joe Boyd,
Here.
Kevin Kelly,
Here.
Lynn Norris. Here.
All right, first item on the agenda is our consent agenda. It's all matters listed, which includes the open and closed sessions and work session from May 2nd, April 26th, and May 18th. Were there any questions on that part of the consent agenda? I do want to clarify one of the comments in the attendance, remote attendance. All of the rules for COVID no longer exist. There still is remote attendance available for if you are sick or if you are traveling with work or village business. So those are both acceptable reasons to dial in to attend remotely. Okay, were there any questions on the financial statements or payment of the bills for April? Not, do we have a motion to approve consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion to approve consent agenda. Allison? Need a roll call vote?
Joe Boyd,
Yes.
Kevin Kelly,
Yes.
Lynn Norris.
Yes. You also need to call Dave on all matters, since we need 48 votes.
Dave Brutlog.
Yes. Okay, on the agenda, our next item was a public hearing, which we do not need. Tara has submitted a resignation, so we do not need the public hearing. So everybody's aware of it. Kathy will no longer be filling in as a trustee. She has a lot of things going on, and Kathy has done a great job for the village over the years since she's been a trustee. And we thank you for all your hard work, and we're gonna miss you. So thank you for all your work, Kathy. Okay, so the village currently has 5 trustees. I do not have anybody to recommend for tonight, so I will be checking with board members and different people to get a nomination for our meeting next week. So everybody's aware of it. Aaron is at a funeral and Phil has been traveling, so neither of those 2 trustees are here tonight or eligible to attend remotely. So, Pat, would you explain which, if any, votes tonight are going to need 4 yeses rather than 3?
In general terms, your vote needs to be called for all matters. General terms, your vote should be called for all matters, because you're a part of the quorum for tonight's business. Any ordinance, any expenditure of funds requires 4 affirmative yea votes. Several of the matters tonight, either directly or indirectly require an ordinance. So I'll speak up as we get to individual matters, but in general terms, I suggest your vote be taken on all matters. If we have any vote that is less than a 4-0 vote, I'll speak to address whether the vote that occurred tonight is sufficient to pass the matter.
Okay, thank you. So Allison, just add my name to the roll call. Okay, next item on the agenda is our citizens hearing. Did we have a sheet there for people to sign up? Okay. If anybody wants to sign up, I forgot to announce ahead of time, if anybody wants to sign up to speak, please do so now. I failed to announce that, so we'll accept a signature right now. Yellow meat. Okay, Danny, I'll give the list to Allison. Thank you, apologize for the delay. Got to announce it, so. During our citizens hearing, we do have a 5-minute time limit, so if you get close to 5 minutes, I'll let you know you're about out of time. So Allison is first.
Matt Rector.
Okay, Pat.
Thanks again for this opportunity. So, as the world continues to change at an increasing rate, none of us really know what the future holds. But there are some things that we do know. Right now, commercial property values are decreasing. They're kind of in free fall right now. Interest rates are continuing to increase. And as Amazon continues to put our local stores out of business, financing for projects like this will become harder and harder to pull off. Despite those factors, Terra has been able to secure the funding for this project, and it may be decades before we have another opportunity like this one. The child care industry has changed drastically over the past few decades as more and more dual income families, it becomes more common. Finding reliable child care has become extremely competitive. As soon as a mother finds out that she's pregnant, she starts planning. She knows that her job or career could be at risk. And that's kind of how this whole project started, is that Tara, she had turned down a desperate mother who was pleading with her to take her child just for a couple of days a week. And her license with the state wouldn't permit that. And the situation that the mother found herself in, it was heartbreaking. And delivering that news inspired Tara to pursue this project. And this mother is not the only one. This has happened multiple times. She's had multiple mothers offer her lump sums to buy a spot at her daycare. This hyper-competitive market has resulted in a situation where there are real winners and losers. So Tara's dream is that all Hudson parents will have the option to utilize this community amenity, and that none will have to choose between their career and their child. So I'm just going to recap. A few of you were here for the Planning Commission meeting last week, but I'm going to just recap a few things I discussed at that one. But this piece of land has sat vacant as a residential property for 24 years as of last month. The locations of the library and the park drive both vehicular and foot traffic past what would be proposed future residential homes if it remains residential. Students at Hudson Elementary walk directly past this property to attend the library weekly. Events like baseball games at the park and cars line the street in front of these homes. These characteristics contribute to a level of public visibility that makes these proposed future homes lack privacy and make them less desirable. Surrounding properties are currently zoned for residential use. However, the park, the library, and the school are all exempt from zoning requirements, and they don't have a natural home in any district. Since we have grouped these properties together, we have created an unusual situation for the subject property, which sits directly in the middle of all of them. The purpose of zoning regulations is to ensure that like-use properties are grouped together. And here, it really feels like we are using these zoning regulations to prevent that from happening. It feels like we're being told, you aren't the government. We are. We're exempt. You are not. This property is most suitable for commercial development because of the use of the surrounding properties. These properties serve the public They have hours of open and close, and they have parking lots for their guests. There are natural barriers also that separate it from its residential property neighbors. And there's actually the width of an entire residential lot that separates the house to the north from Terra's proposed lot. And there's a garage currently sitting on that lot, but there's an entire residential lot that separates any house from this lot. And after hearing some concerns of the neighbors, we reached out to the architect, had them draw up new plans to move the site map or the building on the site map further west to minimize the impact on the neighbor to the north. And I meant to pass these out before I started talking, so I apologize, but I have a picture I want you guys to see, so if you don't mind, you've already seen it, Joe, but I'll give it to you.
Your time is about up, so try and wrap it
Okay,
up.
I'll be real quick. I want you to look at the photos there. We have a real shortage of parking in that area. That picture was taken on May 5th, last Tuesday. That was about 7:40 PM. And that was after about 10 cars had already filed out of there. There was cars completely lining both sides of the street in what would be these houses' front yards. And if you look, the library has signs that letting them know this is not welcome for, only for library use. And on that particular day, there were 3 parking spots available in the library's parking lot, despite their signs, because there's not enough parking there. Wouldn't it be nice if there was another like-use property directly next door that could help shoulder the burden of the parking needs in the area? And actually, the times of open and close would coordinate perfectly. So, this property actually solves problems. It doesn't create this proposal. And, we're desperately in need of commercial property. There's actually 0 commercial lots that are available to be developed. They don't exist in this town. And so we propose converting this property into a light commercial district that would fit in with the neighbors, the school, the park, and the library. And this would only attract use in the childcare industry. This property, we paid double what the value of it is for residential property. And the reason is because it's worth more to a daycare than it is to anyone else. That's the highest and best use of this property. This would allow us to finish off this block. It'll allow for multiple community amenities to be grouped together where they minimize their impact on their residential neighbors. They're able to complement each other and coordinate services.
Okay, Pat, you need to
I'm done.
finish.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Allison, who's next?
Michael?
Quick, spoke last Friday with Mike Butts with Barry Armstrong, I've been assisting Mac and Tara. Want to specifically point some things out in the code. Special use is defined as specific use of land or building permitted herein subject to special conditions. Under the code, all special uses have to be approved by the board. Specifically noting, the village board may allow the special use in the district indicated under conditions stipulated and may impose such additional conditions as it considers necessary to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. Now, frankly, I think this should be allowed as a use in C1. And this property should be rezoned. It fits more closely in with the commercial enterprises listed in C1. Many of the ones that would be a concern about the location near the school and the library, there's too many safeguards in place for that to become a reality. There's limits both in the code and under the laws of the state of Illinois about how close an establishment that sells alcohol can be to the public school. This property could never actually, under the law, be one of those establishments, and the village would have the ability to, even if that law changed, deny liquor license because of its proximity to those locations. plan, and think of daycare center, the construction that this is gonna be, more of the heavy commercial uses, the inside of this is gonna be much more easily remodeled into a home than it is going to be a large retail business. When you think of your daycare, you're gonna have, it's for 9 or more children, it's gonna have a kitchen, it's gonna have bathrooms, it's gonna have separate rooms. It's not gonna be a big open floor that a Sherman's could have washing machines and other appliances for sale. It just frankly wouldn't be practical for it. I do think it would be appropriate under the code in reviewing C1, to make this a C1. However, I do think, while not specifically on the docket today, if a daycare center will be made a special use under C1, this board would have the ability to put whatever conditions upon the grant of C1 it wanted. I mean, the code specifically says may impose such additional conditions as it considers necessary. There's no limitation on that. So this board could put a limitation on that special use, that this rezoning for this special use is specifically limited only for the use of a daycare center, and that any other use is prohibited. And that be a way this board could protect the village of Hudson if it decides that it would not be appropriate at this time to rezone this into C1. Even though I think under the factors for a zoning amendment, specifically the one about the actual use of the surrounding land, you know, as Max said, these are all public amenities. As a parent, I think of 2 children of different ages, the best place that I could drop my youngest son off at daycare would be on the same street where I drop my oldest off at school, or the oldest off at the library. It does make sense, but if that can't wait, there are ways under the code to protect the village of Hudson and its plan for the future while still allowing this to go forward.
Thank you. Allison?
Brad Lang.
Brad Lang, 406 Havens Drive, that's in Illinois. I have 2 points I'm going to bring up. First, it was just thank you, board, for all your work that you put into this and consideration. I know I'm speaking as a citizen, not as a member of the planning committee, but something that brought up recently tonight was the fact that it sat vacant for 20 some years. I spoke to someone today actually that had mentioned looking into that property and they didn't want to sell it. So it didn't sit vacant because no one wanted it. It sat vacant because they didn't want to sell it. And I'm gonna go to the other thing that Michael just brought up about easily converted back to a home. I think that fits right into our residential with a special use, because if it stays residential and it is a special use, it can easily be converted to a home that's already on a residential lot. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Brooks.
Hi, everybody. I'm not actually talking about the zoning issue. Pat, can you explain to me how the mayor now has trustee authority? In a little bit more detail than this is the way it's gonna be?
You're talking about at the meeting tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, Illinois state law provides that if 3 trustees are present, the mayor is the president of the board of trustees. He's a member of the corporate authorities. That instance, and only that instance, when 3 trustees are present, he participates in the meeting and votes like a trustee.
That's state law.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, because the ordinance that I read is basically it's tiebreaker only within the precedent.
Yeah, there are certain, so you're, as a non-home rule municipality, your ordinances cannot trump or override state law provisions. There are some instances where the mayor votes. One is the circumstance of tonight, other times when there's a tiebreaker, and in other instances, even short of a tie, the mayor could vote. Like if one other trustee was present, we had a 3-2 vote tonight on an ordinance, the mayor's vote would be called, even though he wasn't necessary to form the quorum, because if you have to have 4 yay votes, but only 3 are here voting yay, then in that instance, his vote's called as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. Anybody else?
No.
All right, with that, the citizens portion of the hearing is closed. Next is the report from me. For anybody that's tried to listen to our YouTube streaming, we have a audio problem. We are working on it and we will continue to work on it. We experimented a little bit tonight and it didn't help, so we will work on it and get it working correctly. Next item on the agenda is a sewer study status. Greg, did you have any updates for us?
A couple things, Mayor, thank you. Apologize for being late. My wife decided to have car problems. It's tough to ignore that and go home tonight. Progress, we were making progress. We have made progress on the final facilities planning report. I have incorporated changes from the comments and questions at the special board meeting on the 18th of May. We are ready to add any final questions or input that the board has, and then be able to pretty much have in final form the FPR to complete the grant process. We would then submit that to IEPA and then close out our work minus the public meetings that are still going to take place. So if there's any input from the board, I would appreciate getting that so we can produce essentially a June version of the facilities planning report. So I would look for that pretty quickly. We are anticipating the scheduling of the public meetings as the next step for the board to be able to hear from the village residents. The agenda and format, we talked about this at the last meeting, the agenda and format and content of the meetings are entirely up to the village. We're simply doing this as a courtesy to the community, and there is no formal obligation at this moment to follow any sort of procedure. So I, as the engineer, can assist putting together various elements for that so that we can be ready, and we would anticipate there would be mostly a question and answer process there. Third item is that we had assisted Sarah with the June IEPA grant update letter, and Sarah has that, and has that gone to them? That's Sarah.
No, it's due the 15th, so it'll be done by the end of the week here.
So she gets me going early because she knows that sometimes it takes a little bit longer for me, but we got right on that. And then Sarah had reminded me that the final dates for the grant program work to be completed were, Sarah, what date?
I don't have that right in front of me. I apologize. September, I believe, yeah.
So we want to have everything packaged up with a bow from the village so that the grant process could be completed. And then we are anticipating our next phase of the engineering services to be provided for the sanitary sewer project. And Mayor, I have detailed that in that memo to you of March 21st. I have additional copies of that this evening if you want me to pass that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and pass it.
All right, I'll do that. It's not garbage.
While you're passing that out, I do want to clarify for everybody here. We talked about a public meeting and we talked about a public hearing. IEPA does require public hearings prior to submitting the request for the grant, correct?
That is correct, but that is only for the next grant application. It would be for input at this moment for the facilities planning report. So yes, and then we would submit that with the grant application for construction. But that would be only after that application was assembled and ready to go. So there are two, I stand corrected if I misspoke and said this was a public hearing. That's what would be required for the grant application. This would be a public meeting, less formal and not required.
Okay, so I would like to set a date for our first public meeting towards the end of June. What is your availability, Greg?
After the 24th, I am out. I go on vacation for 2 weeks. Up until then, I do have availability. So essentially for the following 2 weeks. I leave on the 22nd. So
How about June 20th? It's a Tuesday.
I have that open.
Trustees, do the majority of you have that date open? Okay, so we'll set up a public meeting June 20th. We'll do 7 o'clock here at the police department.
There's a zoning board of appeals meeting on June 20th at 7 o'clock at the police station.
Okay. Will that run more than a half? How about the 19th? Are you available then?
I have a meeting on the evening of the 19th.
About the 21st? Or we can go back to the previous week, 16th, 15th, 14th.
What if we were to schedule the meeting on the 20th at 7:30, or have it here?
Kathy, how long do those usually take?
An hour is usually.
Okay, I don't want to overlap with them because
Sure.
those people will be available to come here.
Okay.
So
okay.
what have you got the week before that? For availability?
The evening of the 14th.
Okay, trustees, is that gonna work for most of us?
Wednesday evening, yes.
Okay, we'll do Wednesday evening, June 14th, here at the police department. We'll have a public meeting.
Okay.
And then we have missed the cutoff for the quill to call it a public hearing. The public hearings have to be published.
That is correct.
And have 15 to 30 days prior to the actual meeting. So let's just go with the one meeting on June 14th. For a public meeting, are we required to take minutes?
If a majority of the former board of presidents consider meeting of trustees, so if the trustees will be here, then
Okay, Allison, are you available that day? You're going.
I'll be gone. Do you want that meeting streamed?
Can-
Would be a question.
Can you do minutes, Sarah?
I can.
Okay. So, yes, we would like to stream it. And I will get with you to cover the materials I got prepared for it for review, and I will send something out to other people too, to get more people to review it, so.
And Mayor, that meeting on the 14th is at 7 p.m.
7 o'clock here at the police station. So it won't be in the quill in time, but we can post it and people can get the word out. We can put it on social media and just say it's a public hearing about the sewer system. We'll cover the status and some of the projected costs and routes for the system. So. Can you? That'd be awesome, if you can, appreciate it. 14, 7 o'clock.
And please emphasize public meeting.
Yeah. So,
Yes, sir.
okay. Greg, I did have one other question for you. We talked about whether or not any of the real estate tax payments went to Benward or for the sewer system, and we did find out that there is one. I think we didn't think there was when we had our special meeting, but we looked up Casey's in Normal, and I found they were making a tax payment that went to Benward. Do you have any idea? Did I misunderstand, or how does that?
I was gonna check with Tim
Okay,
at Benward and kind of validate that from his end.
okay,
So I will do that and have that
appreciate
information.
that. So. Okay, did anybody have any questions for Greg? Do we think we have any other changes to the report so we can get that finalized?
And I would have copies of the report at the meeting that would be, again, a June iteration that has essentially the elements that were comments or questions from the meeting the other night. So if there was anything that anyone wanted to make sure got taken care of, please get that back to me. Right now, without Allison's meeting minutes in front of me, I had my notes.
Are we gonna make that report downloadable for the citizens somewhere? We're gonna post that? Yeah, did you scan the last one or did we get it electronically also?
I sent it over electronically. I can do that again once I.
Let's do that.
So I'm wanting to drop the guillotine on that. So as of Monday of next week, I will do that. So if I don't have comments from anybody on the board, that version, Joe, will be electronically transferred to Sarah and then it can go out. Okay.
Any other questions for Greg? Okay, thank you, Greg.
Yes, sir.
Next on the agenda, we set the date. It is not a public hearing, it is a public meeting. Our first one will be June. We'll probably do the hearings in July. I want to pass along the CIRA regional airport tax status. That tax did get approved by the Senate, House of Representatives both. So there will be an additional tax on our real estate taxes. I'm not sure when it'll start, probably the tax bill will get next year. So, the gain that the mayors did get forward was that the representation on the airport board will include 4 members from Bloomington Normal, 2 from small towns, population less than 5,000, and 1 from the rural areas, unincorporated areas of McLean County. So there will be better representation on the airport board. So we did gain some there.
Just want to thank you for opposing that.
Thank you.
I mean, good effort. She opposed it.
Next on the agenda is a boundary agreement and a discussion and possible vote. I passed out an email I sent out a couple weeks ago about setting up a boundary agreement with Normal so that we have an agreement that says Normal can go so far north and we can go so far south. If Normal annexes the Brand Industries business and the Nussbaum trucking business, they're only a couple miles from us. So my recommendation to the board is that we set up a boundary on, I believe it was road 2100.
2000 north, I think it's what you have.
2000. I don't have my copy right in front of me. It's a mile south of town. It's just north of where Brand Industries is today, that road. And I want to know with the board if you're in agreement with it or have questions on it. It would limit us. We could not go past that with any commercial or residential properties, and Normal could not come closer than that road. So if the board is in agreement with it, I would just like a vote to authorize me to go ahead and send communications to Normal to get that process started.
I'll make a motion that the mayor start discussing with Normal this boundary agreement.
Okay,
I'll second.
so we have a motion and a second for the mayor to discuss the boundary agreement with Normal. Is there any final questions or discussions? If not, Allison, let's do a voice roll call.
Dave Fruitlog,
Yes.
Joe Boyd,
Yes.
Kevin Kelly,
Yes.
Lynn Norris.
Yes.
Okay, I'll pursue that with Normal and keep everybody aware of what's going on there. Next report is from Danny on water, public property, streets and zoning.
I already gave the water usage to the Quill, 108,000 a day, 3.3 million for the month. I believe Sarah told me 5% loss for the month, or so doing good there. I can wait to talk about the playground. I just handed you guys under Aaron's section if you want. Otherwise, I'll continue on with the rest of my items. We poured the dog park pad up there to start the construction of the pavilion and put in a fire hydrant for the dogs to use. Also, completed half a block of sidewalk on South Washington, starting on the drainage projects. The building addition over here, the shell is basically completed, just a few polishing touches, and the material showed up today to work on the metal on the bottom east shed. So that's moving along on target. As I think I mentioned last month, unfortunately for me, I'm gonna be gone on vacation. The 9th through the 18th of this month. So Mark Meyer is gonna be taking care of the water and stuff while I'm gone. Kevin went with me up to the post office. I'd sent out an email to you guys about the putting another blue drop-off mailbox around town somewhere, and got a final when Kevin and I were up there, the postmaster was not there, so we talked to them. She sent me an email back, and basically for numerous reasons, a lot of which are financial and due to the size of the town, they have to have a mailbox there at the post office, and we're not of size to have a second one somewhere else in town. So that's the status of that. McLean County Asphalt did our skim patching for that part of the MFT program. As I mentioned last month, the plumbing is basically all done on the water system upgrade inside the office there. The SCADA system is all installed, however, is not working 100% yet, so we're still tweaking some of that. He'll be back again, I believe tomorrow or the next day to work on that. It does work, but it doesn't work correctly the way we want to, so it's close. And finally, now that if I heard correctly that Kathy is resigned, I guess I can speak freely about Kathy now without worries of repercussions on my review. And that is that I really appreciate being able to work with her ever since I became an employee, from the Zoning Board of Appeals to the Planning Commission and then to a trustee. No offense to you three that are sitting here, including you, Dave. Kathy's been from my feeling, one of my best trustees as far as being available to discuss issues when they come up. And I feel she is second to very few people in the community as far as caring about the community and wanting to try to do the right thing and be fair and equal to all. So I appreciate her being a trustee and serving on the other committees for the village. That's all I have.
Thank you, Danny. Does anybody have any questions for Danny? Danny, enjoy your vacation. It's well deserved. All right, next is our village marshal, Mark Cuddy.
All right, well, you should all have a copy of my report. At least I hope I gave everybody a copy. And I'll just hit some of the highlights on it. I always like to tell you how many reports we took, and we did take 3 criminal reports during the month of May: an unlawful visitation interference report, an animal complaint report, and a criminal damage to property report. Let's see, Officer Lane and I, we attended the Hudson Elementary School graduation event and lunch in the park, which was very well attended by parents and by the students. I thought it was a great thing for the community to do. Kudos to the Lions Club for helping out with that event and cooking the hot dogs and everything. In conjunction, or actually it happened that same day, Officer Lane and myself picked up the 2 raffle winners that won the ride to school in a police car. And so we picked up the 2 elementary students and drove them to the school. They loved it. They liked showing up with the lights and sirens going on. So I think they got a lot of attention because of that. We registered 11 golf carts. So we are now up to 38 golf carts in the village. Kevin and I attended a meeting with the body camera and squad car camera vendor Motorola Solutions. That is the second vendor that we got quotes from, and Kevin will be discussing that later. Between quotes between Axon and Motorola Solutions. Basically, the only 2 vendors that are the big names in body cameras and squad car camera system. Officer Lane and I both worked the Hudson Garage Sale event on Saturday, May 6th. And as usual, there were a lot of parking concerns that we had, but we worked through it and kept the roadways clear so that we could get emergency vehicles down, but that's what it is every year, so. Then, one of the other kind of strange calls, and it may prompt further discussion how to handle this issue, is that on Saturday, May 13th, Officer Lane called me at home and said, "Hey, Mark, we've got a sick raccoon, and the citizens think that it may be rabid." So I said, "Well, have we called animal control?" And he said, "Yes, Medcom, our dispatch center, has called, and they said they would be out there within 30 minutes. So Officer Lane cleared. I said, "Great, good deal. Keep me apprised of the situation." Well, about 3 hours later, the citizens called back and said, "Well, animal control hadn't shown up." And they called, and they didn't answer their phone, and they didn't answer the Medcom either. Now, our contract with animal control is a pretty basic contract. Thank you, Lynn, for giving me a copy so I can review it. We don't pay anything for that contract unless they come out and collect an animal and take care of it. But when you read the fine print, they are available during regular working hours, which is Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. So it doesn't really do us a lot of good with that. So we may want to have to discuss about having, and it wouldn't happen a lot, but at times we may need some private type of vendor that can supply that service to us. For this one, it worked out well for us, not so much for the raccoon, but it did work out well for us. We were able to get it trapped, and then we could take it out to the burn pile, where then you keep to the brush, and then we put the raccoon down. So in my opinion, it wasn't rabies, it was probably just temper anyway. It wasn't aggressive, it was very lethargic. So yes, it was a disease of the animal. And we're just not really set up to be able to handle that. Just so happens we were able to get that taken care of. So I think we may need to have further discussions about who we can utilize, because I do know that other small towns do use, I believe, some private companies. And the old radar signs I took down, so they're down. And the new ones are in boxes there and all over the station. We'll be trying to get those up and running in this month of June. We need to reinstall, we need brackets and different things. I'll need to program them with the help of the vendor because they are computers, and we have to be able to basically input what we want to get out of them. They're a lot more sophisticated than the old ones, which is good for us for statistical purposes, harder for us to program. So the vendor's going to walk us through it, and hopefully we'll get those up and running. Again, they're solar, much nicer, so we won't have to replace batteries every week. That's all I have, unless there's some questions.
Pardon?
Go ahead.
Do you want to get with me with some other options for the animal control thing, and then we can?
Yes, I'll research and come up with some, and then we can sit down and discuss how we want to handle that. Absolutely.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Do we have any questions for Mark? Next is civil defense, Jeff Thomas. I did hear the siren go off today. Twice.
Yes, and it went off twice because we wanted to test our radios, and so the radio that was keeping the police department, that we can set off sirens when we're out and about during stormy weather, we can take that mobile radio with us. And we wanted to test to see if it works, so that was the first one that you heard, testing ours. And then, Jason wanted to test his also, so we did a double test with that. It works fine, so, good to know that they work. So,
All right, we'll move next to the reports of standing committees, finance, budget, contracts, and employees. Lynn?
Yep, we're not gonna need to vote on the planning tonight, to really discuss it much. I met with committee and Kevin was there last night, so Joe was there, they know. I've got some more homework to do with it, and I'll kind of put it all together and present it at the next meeting. We're gonna be ready to vote on by then. And then the second one was just to kind of discuss, purchase of a commercial fridge for the concession stand. Concession stand has been up and running, we have an F3 food permit, so it's like a lower class food permit, because we really don't have any temperature controlled items. It's just to make the popcorn. Next year, we would like to do that. We need a refrigerator for this year. Right now, we're just utilizing a cooler. It's not efficient, so we would like a fridge, but knowing next year we want to do more temperature controlled, we would like to go out and purchase that fridge this year. We looked at Sourcewell. And there is a deal with one of them for 60% off. So Sarah has a call in for an estimate on that. Full price is like $1,900. Sourcewell's contract should be 60% off. So we're just waiting to see if that is what it's gonna be, and then if there's gonna be shipping or not. It should be under the amount that Sarah's authorized to make for, like, on her own, right? She's treasurer can do like 2,000.
I don't know your spending policy by heart, but you have a spending policy that.
Yeah,
delegates for
I'll
us.
make sure. I just kind of want an okay for it. There's money in parks right now, and then any profit from concessions this year will go back into parks.
Yeah.
So I just kind of want,
Yeah.
cool, okay.
It's a good idea.
Here's that commercial refrigerator.
Yes, it's a commercial fridge, yeah. We just figured it'd be best to do that this
Is,
year.
and the bidding you're looking at, is that the service that Aaron brought up? Okay.
Yep.
Excellent.
And that's all I have for today.
Okay. Now, working on the employee manual is a lot of work, so appreciate what you and the committee are doing. Phil is not here for streets. Denny, did you have anything else to add for streets? Okay, the Plain Street, I know it's looking real good. I don't know how much patching work we did, but that process worked real well.
Several streets around town.
It seems to be holding up real well.
I want to just comment about the Valentine and South Street. You said, like, I guess after you did that special seal, after you snowplow, how everything is good and smooth, and it does look nice. I didn't like it over the winter time, but how you said it was gonna be is what it is, and are you pretty happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
All right, next is the ordinance and zoning department. I'll take the lead on that for right now. First item is the planning commission regular meeting report. Doug, I think you had a regular planning commission meeting. Do you have anything to report to us on that?
Just that we have begun a nice thorough overview of the master plan. And to kind of subset off of that, Richard Bland, who is no longer on the planning commission, his term ended in April. We are looking at items that don't necessarily require board action. They are very minor pieces that we want to pull out of the master plan, direct to the board person, board trustee that's in charge of that area. So we'll be developing that to kind of pare down the master plan, make it more usable, user-friendly, more viable, and then also continue looking at reporting on what's been completed on that plan, which has developed a nice addition at the end of that master plan. We'll continue that as things happen, make that useful for the board and for those coming after us.
All right, the next item was the planning commission public hearing report. How did that public hearing meeting go?
It went very well. We had a number of comments that kind of mirrored what had occurred prior in the other public hearings that we had and the other board meetings here. It was very orderly. Great comments related to that property issue. If somebody else on the planning commission has something to add, I think it's very beneficial.
Any of the other planning commission members want to add anything on that? Okay, then the next thing is the public hearing items. Do you have any recommendations to make to the board on that?
We
I think
do.
there were 3 or 4 items.
Yeah, we want to recommend to the board, as we did in our prior recommendation, leaving that property residential with a special use addition for the daycare center. We shied away, we stayed away from C1, C2 changes to the zoning ordinances. There is some concern by those along Front Street. Their concerns are that we change now suddenly from C1 to C2. Does that do anything to our property in terms of tax issues, loans, things like that that might occur? We wanted to stay with the residential designation based on information shared with us by village attorney Pat McGrath with caution. And we took that very seriously about spot zoning. Be careful not to inject a commercial property into what's considered as a whole a residential area. One item that would benefit, we feel, benefit the village a great deal would be the beginning or origination of a business district or park that would take place or be situated to the west of the library. That would be a prime area for not only this project, but other commercial projects that would like to make their way into the village. That would be something that would be sewer, greatly benefit. We've lost a number of businesses to the neighboring towns because they have a sewer system. We were to create a business district. It would attract new business, which we all want. Just want that area left residential. Do agree that special use for daycare center would accomplish the aims of the project. Again, we didn't look at anything related to financing. Those are outside our purview. That would be the planning commission's recommendation to the board, and a little bit about what went into that.
And if I heard you correctly, then your recommendation was to put a daycare center as a special use in residential.
Correct.
Okay, so if we do that, and maybe this is a Pat question, can any residential lot then be eligible for a daycare center?
They would have to receive a special use. They have to apply a petition to any It's R2 is the zoning district for that lot, and that's what the hearing was on, so it'd be R2 residential district, which is the prevailing residential district. So if you were to make that ordinance change, then any owner of a property in the R2 district could petition to receive a special use permit. It doesn't guarantee them the award of a special use permit. The decision to award a special use permit is a legislative act that comes back before you to decide whether to award it, but it would make that an available option or a remedy that you could provide on a request from a property owner.
Okay,
The
and
differences there are two, the number of children that are being cared for. At in-home settings, I believe it's up to 8 per ordinance. A daycare center such as this would be over 9. So Pat's right, they would have to apply for that special use designation. And we understand that, but again, it's because of the makeup of that area being primarily suitable for residential. And if for some reason this enterprise would not proceed or find itself viable in a few years down the road, that would not be impossible to rehab or retrofit into a residence. That's done many, many times. So that's where we are with the suggestion and recommendation to the board.
Two other points. One thing I should have mentioned on special use. Special use is is a point of relief in your zoning code where you can apply specific and special conditions. Mr. Butts mentioned that in his presentation, but I should mention that as that change. There, and Doug, I think you answered all of these 4 questions, but I want to make sure I relate the recommendations to the 4 agenda items. So the 4 agenda items, item 1 was, for the hearing, was consider a zoning amendment to make daycare center a special use in R2, which that brings with it the affirmative, a yes recommendation from the plan commission. Second item was to amend the zoning regulations in the C1 district to make daycare center permitted use. That received a negative recommendation. Third item was to make changes to the permitted uses in C1 and C2 zoning districts, and there was a negative recommendation for any changes there. The final was to rezone 106 Pearl Street, and that received from R2 to C1, and that also received a negative recommendation. Is that correct?
It is.
Perfect. Thank you.
yeah, I want to make sure I understand too, the concern is not with having a daycare center there. The concern is what might happen in the future. As far as if it was ever.
That's always good to talk about, but we're dealing with right now, what we think is best for the village. The item of a daycare is a fantastic idea. And the question was posed, if not there, where? Well, west of the library would be incredibly efficient. It would be large enough. It would be something that the village could secure and develop into a very, very usable area. And as one of the public comments, that property has been looked at and pursued by the village during my time here as a very usable lot, either for overflow parking. It could be used as a wonderful farmer's market area. It could be used for school activities. It could be used for village activities. If there were to be a cookout, that lot would pretty much serve the whole community if everyone wanted to attend. So we aren't looking at what if the future holds. We're saying right now, based on what we were charged to determine, we recommend that it remain residential with that special use daycare center.
So then a daycare center could go on that lot.
If it remains residential, that's all.
If it remains residential.
So speaking a little bit first to, and Doug's mentioned a couple times, kind of their task, and we talked about this at the last meeting, but the planning commission is fundamentally a land use committee. Their job when considering zoning amendments is to consider land use related factors. Our code lays out the task before them. That includes looking at suitability of the property for uses authorized in the existing district, suitability for uses authorized in the proposed district, this for an amendment, character and type of land use of nearby property, zoning nearby property, and the proposals and recommendations contained in the land use plan for the village is adopted by the trustees. So those are the factors that your ordinance said they're supposed to consider. You as a board are not constrained by those same factors and can consider a much broader range of factors if you choose to. Second thing is in terms of the action path for the planning commission's recommendation. Their recommendation is zone it, leave the zoning R2 and make a special use available for daycare center. That would require another public hearing because there's no pending request from the property owner to obtain a special use permit. Based on what's been communicated previously, I would not anticipate this property owner would seek that request because their financing, from what they've conveyed to us, doesn't permit or wouldn't accept that zoning arrangement. But you do have before you the ordinance change, which would not be specific to this. It would be specific to any R2 property, not just this property. But it would enable, if this owner chose to seek it, a process for them to obtain a special use permit while it stays R2. If you were to accept and act on the recommendation of planning.
And if I understood you correctly, the board can consider different things or should consider different things on what the planning commission is directed to based on what's in our ordinance.
The should is for you guys to decide individually as you consider your vote. Fundamentally, it's a decision to change zoning classifications or to change zoning regulations is a legislative act. And if a court were to ever consider a challenge to that legislative act, there are factors on like rezonings that case laws indicated are all reasonable and appropriate considerations. I'm not saying these are things you have to consider. I'm not suggesting how you weigh these factors, just simply reporting that when a court looks at a decision like those before you tonight, the factors the courts have indicated are relevant for a board to consider include compatibility with existing uses and zoning of nearby property, the extent to which property values of the subject property are diminished by existing zoning restrictions, the extent to which a proposed amendment promotes public health, safety, and welfare of the village, relative gain to the public as compared to the hardship imposed upon the applicant, the suitability of the property for the purposes for which it's zoned, the length of the time that the subject property has been vacant is presently zoned, considered in the context of development in the area where the property is located, consistency of the proposed amendment with comprehensive plan and any adopted land use policies, and generally that the proposed amendment will benefit the needs of the community. So that's obviously a broader list than what the planning commission was tasked with considering. Fundamentally, it's a legislative act. And so you as legislators, even on a municipal setting, have a policy choice to make. You have a recommendation from your committee with specific focus on the land use side. And that's a recommendation for you to either accept or reject. Fundamentally, I would suggest that regardless if you were to accept a recommendation that requires an ordinance change, if you were to desire to reject the recommendation and do something else that results in an ordinance change, you would need to direct me to prepare that ordinance. I didn't come bearing 5 potential pre-drafted ordinances, not knowing how you're going to fall as a legislative body. And ultimately, to rezone requires an ordinance change. To change the special uses in R2 requires a physical ordinance to be prepared. To change the permitted uses in C1 requires a physical ordinance. So tonight's action, which would require 48 votes, because it would be to expend funds, would be to direct me to prepare the ordinance for your next meeting. However you recommend it. Want an ordinance that makes the daycare center a special use in R2, tell me to prepare that. If we want to rezone this property to C1, make daycare center permitted, tell me to prepare that ordinance. Whatever it is you're doing.
Can you talk any more about, I mean, you just said that the lot to the west of the library would be great. I mean, it's one building over. What's your thought that would be great and this one's not acceptable? It's one building split, any of you, yeah.
The property to the west is, and was looked at by the purchaser at one time. There were some great comments made at the public hearing that asked the question, Joe, and you were there, what caused the buyer to move from considering the property west to then considering the township property to the other side of the library. If we look at available property to the west, I believe that's the Turner property. Much of that could be obtained by the village, and I understand TIF funds could be used to purchase that ground. There would be a much more open area, not only for a daycare, but other industry. There are many people in town that would like to see a restaurant, a hotel perhaps. Any number of these industries, if they had an open area, not constrained by housing, school, library, so forth, if they had an open area that was automatically and originally zoned as commercial, they would have a viable avenue to locate in Hudson. So that's where we're at. We love the idea of daycare. Don't misunderstand. We just feel that that property should have been pursued to the west of the line.
Okay, so I mean, I wholly agree that we need more commercial space in Hudson. And that would be a great area to develop, anything toward that would be great to develop. But I mean, my question is, how do you say the area, the lots directly west of the library would be great? And this lot directly east is not. I mean, they're literally next door.
I don't think we're saying that lot's not great. I think it is, we're saying it would be all right for daycare. We're saying, looking at the surrounding areas, if the school was no longer there, if the ball fields were not there, they would resort back to residential. So to have this one lot in the middle of this area be commercial, that's not a commercial, you look uptown, it's a commercial district. You have a strip, you have an expanded area of commercial property. To have one that we're rezoning for a business doesn't make sense necessarily. And I know that, I'm gonna go back to Pat, I wanted to say something earlier. You brought up they can look at other things and that the lot, especially may not go to the finances. We can't look at finances. I don't think the board should look at finances, because you don't, when someone wants to come and buy a house, you don't, yes, you're hoping they have the money to build this house, but now you're, well, who's the bank? How are you financing it? You just know that they're building a house. So I take all that out of this one chunk of land in the middle of a residential district. I'm not saying it's not good for a daycare. I'm just saying that a special use, in my opinion, as well as the planning commission, would work for a daycare there.
I really disagree that it's in the middle of the residential. I mean, when I look at the map, it's almost contiguous with the rest of our commercial. I mean, down the block, we have a bank and Dale's thing. I mean, if we continue with this, it'd be great if we continue to develop that commercial zone you're saying west of the library. Then it would be contiguous. I mean, that zone would be, we'd have a library that's exempt, okay, but it's not a residential use. So we got, we're saying we want to develop that to the west of the library to be, commercial would be a great idea. And then we got a library that's not residential. And then we got this lot. I mean, it would still be a contiguous zone.
We can kick this all night, Joe.
I was
You
just
still
trying to
between
understand
the
your thoughts.
library, between the library and this proposed daycare lot, I don't know how many homes there are, 3, 4, 3. That would have to be, if you're wanting to build that out as a business district, that's one of those what ifs that may be in the future, 25 years from now. We're saying right now, residential is our recommendation, but that's special use. So there is the possibility of doing it if the board chooses to stay with our recommendation. We're offering the idea that there is, in our minds, a more suitable commercial district that was looked at. Why that evaporated, we don't know. That's not a question we can ask, because that goes to financing. We're not sure why this property was purchased at the amount it was.
Would you like to know?
No. So that's our recommendation. The property to the west of the library, we think, would be worth pursuing by the board if in fact we do want to attract business on a wholesale level. And I guess we agree to disagree, but that's where we are in terms of our decision.
We did look at the map and discuss a little bit at our last meeting. the road coming into town or up the interstate there, that first entry road. If the property west of town there was purchased, you could turn in or loop it right into that area. So I'm understanding you're saying it's one block over, or one lot over, but we're looking at just residential compared to commercial. We're not looking at properties to the north, because that is a what if that they buy. I mentioned this in one of the other meetings. They buy Dave Blair's house, and he's already got a nice work shed there, and all of a sudden now you have a mechanic shop across the street. Not saying that's good or bad, but you want a bunch of cars coming out of the mechanic shop, we talked about this with. There's a lot of other things we can get around with what if. We're just looking at residential, commercial. Is it a good spot for a daycare? We're not saying that it's a bad spot, we're just saying that there is an option for the special use, if that's what the board chooses.
Could you repeat that, please?
There is an option for them to put a daycare there with what we're proposing with the special use.
I really don't like, I mean, I'm not a lawyer or not a real estate agent, but I really don't like this residential special use, because what the village then gets is a residential lot with commercial building on it. I know people are saying, oh, you could turn it into a house. It's not in the village's interest to end up with an empty commercial building. I mean, if we're gonna say, oh, we're gonna let them build a commercial building, and they do fail, it's gonna end up being an empty commercial building, because unless we can find another person to do daycare.
I think you said it perfectly. Looking at what's the best interest of the village, we're also looking at what's the best from the people. It's the citizens of the village.
But I've heard from a lot of citizens who want a daycare.
We're
not considering that, I know, but we don't have anywhere else, we don't have commercial property, we need. And we're saying we could buy a field and turn it into that, but that could be 20 years.
Joe, one of the factors you can consider, if you find there to be a benefit to the community by having a daycare center, you can consider whether the proposed change would create a benefit to the community. That's a factor that's not within the purview of the planning commission recommendation, but it's within your legislative discretion to consider that factor.
Is there an issue with us wanting to rezone it C1 tonight? Or like not taking a recommendation and saying, no, we would like to rezone it C1.
That they're gonna.
But with the concern with all the other businesses that are on the C1, at least the C1 gets them going right now, but then we ask them to consider a C3 class with just daycare, like daycare. I understand it's not just daycare, but like daycare.
I feel like we should clean up C1, right? And if we're gonna put in C1, but we just think we should remove.
Okay, and then there was the concern with the other businesses that are in C1 right now, if we mess with that, is it gonna, like, did we ask any of the other businesses that are in C1? Do we know for sure if any of them have loans, or if there's anything that it would, or are we just kind of assuming all scenarios with it?
So it was not within the scope of what the plan commission was asked to consider whether to rezone any other business from C1 to C2.
Right, no, but
So-
I'm saying with that concern that was brought up for them, for us to continue to then continue to say, we don't wanna do it C1. I'm saying if we did it C1, and then we asked them to consider a C3, I know it's spot zoning, but to me, if you're gonna have a commercial district, I mean, it's not really spot, like, it's continuous. Yes, we have the library. Then I just thought of this tonight, if Pets and Grows and the library wants to add on, and they need to get a loan for it, are they gonna get a loan that's residential, or are they gonna come and ask if we can zone commercial? They're exempt.
They're clarifying that.
I wonder, right.
They're permitted use in any district. So you could, if you believe the library building was unfit to ever be converted residential, you could rezone the library building C1.
Right.
Or C2 or whatever zoning district you felt, it's, your code
So we're
says.
trying to think of all future potential, there's a future potential of that whole area wanting to be commercial at one point. What's that?
Commercial district right across from the ballpark.
Right, there's a lot of traffic already down there.
The kids.
Yeah, my kids go down there.
During the summer, more.
Absolutely. I honestly don't have major concern, because I'm looking at the future potential, yes. But if there's other businesses that go in there, then yes, I have to maybe change the behaviors of the way my kids travel around Hudson. But I'm not there. We're not there. We have a business that wants to go in. And we can't automatically assume that they're gonna feel, yes, we have to kind of fail safe it. If it does, but my big thing is they're ready to go in now. And public opinion is, we want a daycare in Hudson. For the village to buy that land, that's just more time. It might not ever happen. So I'm honestly on board with not taking the planning commission's recommendation this time and wanting to rezone it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'm hoping that you're not basing the decision on the time it might take for the.
Oh, absolutely not. This has not been, I've taken everything into consideration.
Are you gonna open up a can of worms for future people who wanna have a vacant lot? There's some corner lots.
Yeah, we will have to deal with every situation as it comes.
Don't forget about the residents.
I understand, we did listen to the residents, we spoke to the resident that lives directly right there.
He's on board.
He was on, well, I talked to him and I said, would you be opposed to a daycare there?
Right.
And he said, no, if it was kept residential, because a commercial lot next to your residential property, and we have realtors at our public hearings, will drop his home value.
That's not.
I believe his concern was, what can we do to control what can happen to that in the next 20 years?
I
As
feel like
much
that
as
was
whether
his-
it's
I wasn't
commercial or
able to make the
residential.
last public hearing, but the one before that, and then the last meeting that I addressed him, that was not his major concern was property value. It was what's gonna happen and then traffic.
I think as Joe mentioned, business would fail, and I don't believe it will. You know, what's gonna go in at C1.
Absolutely.
And before
I
you buy
feel
any
like we
building, there
have-
could be more than one business.
Sure.
Well, he could address that by, fixing any commercial zoning rules, right? I mean, we can either fix zone one, C1, or if we make a C3, to make sure we don't get stuff in there we don't want.
See, I think her wish is to have a daycare center, and I think we're granting that wish. Now, the financing or whatever is attached to that.
You don't
can't
get
be
to take,
concerned.
we
You
get
can't
to
be
take that into
concerned.
consideration.
You really can't.
We do.
But the
We
reason,
can't.
Can they?
Yes, absolutely. they can. You can consider whether, you can consider whether an alternative is realistically feasible, and part of that is information you get from the applicant on whether they would pursue it or whether they would be able to. That's not within the subject of what the plan commission was directed to consider under the code.
Yeah.
You have a lot more flexibility as a legislative body to consider factors.
Pat, wouldn't also, if the board later cleaned up commercial districts, any current existing use under the old code would be a pre-existing non-conforming use that would be able to continue?
Correct, they'd be grandfathered under the non-conforming uses section. Yeah, I don't know the terms.
There's
offhand, but-
always gonna be so many what ifs, and
the R2 with the special use for the home daycare makes complete sense. You do it in your house, and we're just allowing you to have a business in a residential area. R2 with the commercial daycare makes no sense to me. I don't think it's in the village's interest to have a commercial building, which is what this is gonna be, on a residential lot. I'm just not in favor of the special use in R2. I don't think it's in the long-term interest of the village. It's very weird to me to have a commercial building on a residential lot. We should just decide whether it's commercial or not. And I think we need more commercial ground.
I
When I
think
look at
what
the
we
map, I
need
think
to
it's
do
pretty
is,
dangerous.
I think this is another discussion, we need to look at other property, the whole plan for the village, right? We have other township ground that's sitting. What if that's sold? What about the village businesses are sold? Things are going downtown. You know, I think we need to look at it, but kind of that, is another discussion, maybe looking at those properties. But for here, I'm kind of on board with residential special use. I'm not on board with C1 and C2 from what the planning commission said twice to us and what our attorney advised. And I think what another employee indicated to me as well. I am on board with, if we do a C3, commercial for daycare, and if that's a win-win, the daycare can get in there, they can get funding.
But the planning commission's always said that's spot zoning. C3 is spot
But I
zoning.
thought we could do whatever, I
We
thought we
can,
could do
right.
what's recommended though.
Can I speak to that? So it's, and I appreciate the fact you may be weary with the concept of repeat public hearings, but for a zoning amendment to come to you, you're asking the public hearing beforehand. And the public hearing is limited to specific published items. So there were 4 items up for the public hearing, 4 items for the planning commission to make a recommendation. The planning commission could hold further public hearings to consider creating a new commercial zoning district, C3. You wouldn't need uses beyond just daycare center. I mean, it's relatively unheard of and not advisable from a land use planning standpoint, to have a zoning district that only has 1 permitted use. But you could refer the matter back to the planning commission for a new public hearing to consider creating a new C3 zoning district and defining permitted and potential special uses in the C3 zoning district. You could, if the applicant sought to, concurrently hold a hearing if that district were to be created on whether their property is to be rezoned. That would, we'd have to restart. So that's not an action item tonight. Your action items tonight have to be germane to the 4 published items. One is making a daycare center special use in R2. Second is making a daycare center permitted in C1. Third is any shifting of uses from C1 to C2. And fourth is rezoning this property R2 to C1. This property being 106 Pearl.
I don't think there's much point in doing that and asking about it. So and they said they don't want it commercial at all. So I mean, so there's no point in going down that road. It's either R2 special use or C1.
But when you say they, who are you referring to?
The planning commission. I mean, I think I heard them say that. They can correct me if I'm wrong.
But what I'm saying is that basically we can, as a board, we can do something different. They say they want to keep it commercial for daycare use. I'm sorry, residential for daycare use. So if we're taking considered funding, hey, they can't do it with residential, we know that they can't get funding because of that. So the other option would be, or the option that I would prefer would be the C3 with that daycare and that code. So they could, I guess they could have the funding for the commercial check, and it would be only a daycare check with the flavor of what the planning commission, the gist of what, even though they said residential, the gist of it is keeping it a daycare.
And so that's the path I was going down the last meeting, right? Voted against C2. I've come to understand, I think, that the choice is really commercial or residential.
It's
We
not,
can
you
move
have to agree with the planning commission's recommendation of.
Tonight, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so tonight, we either have to accept the planning commission recommendation of special use, right?
So you have a couple options tonight.
Yeah.
One option, just stating the obvious, is you need 4 yes votes to direct me to prepare any ordinance change.
Right.
And thus far, not preordaining anyone's vote, but we have conflicting expressions of opinion on how to proceed. So if you voted in a manner consistent with the opinions expressed thus far, and if legislative debate didn't change anyone's mind, you don't have enough votes tonight to do anything, frankly, because any of these matters would require an ordinance change. That requires expenditure of funds, you have to prepare it, it's 4 yes votes. So the matters before you to consider tonight, you could act on tonight, is one, to have me prepare an ordinance to make daycare center a special use in R2. 2, make daycare center permitted in C1. 3, any shifting of uses between C1 and C2. And 4, a rezoning of 106 Pearl Street. Not short circuiting your debate, but one consideration if you're meeting next week. And I appreciate the fact that the property may not value this prospect. If the 4 of you aren't on the same page with how to proceed, they want to consider continuing it, which is within the scope of what you can do in your meeting next week, if you have a special meeting next week. I thought I heard earlier, some more trustees can be there because I'm not sure yet numbers for meeting. Just based on what you guys expressed in consent.
Is it legal to make it C1 tonight and then change it down the road?
You could rezone it C1, and then there's nothing about rezoning it C1 that prohibits you from in the future engaging in the same process of holding a public hearing and rezoning the property to a different zoning district.
But you said you're on board with, you would be on board with the possible C3, daycare center and C3 with some other businesses. Now, if we gave it to the planning commission to have a public hearing and they're meeting to talk about it, and they still, the recommendation was, we do not think a C3 is a good idea, then you already expressed your concerns with going with the planning commission recommendations. Does that, like, I'm not saying.
No,
make your
what
decision now, just saying,
I'm
like,
saying is that I sat into, I think, 3 of the 4 planning commission public hearings, you know, and I do sat in those, heard all those arguments. We've been discussing and hearing testimony from citizens and business owners. What I'm saying is that we're in a logjam right now. So so how can we win and how can we win? So how can we lay the concerns of the current residents of in the future, it can't be sold for those other, not maybe neighborhood friendly, I think Joe's term was neighborhood friendly businesses. And how can we win on that? So, and plus, how can we have that, the funding part of it? They have an issue with funding, right? How can we win both ways? And I think with what they say or what they determine, I'm saying I've heard of the arguments. It's not going to be, if it's more of the same, I would say that is a way that we can win as a village and make it happen. That's my opinion.
I'm not sure we need 3 commercial zones though to make this work. I mean, if we do it C1, we can fix C1.
So there's a concern with other businesses who might be, well,
But we don't
there's
think
not.
it changes any
It
tax
doesn't,
rules.
that's right.
That's bearing on how property taxes are set.
I prefer if we're gonna do it, we do it right the first time. We don't go back and change anything because we're not zoning experts.
Right, we have the right
on that,
tonight
and
to make daycare put to C1,
I
and
understand,
then we can move things out of,
I understand.
okay.
I'd say that, I say I don't wanna do it retroactively because we're not zoning experts. We don't know what other issue comes up that we don't know, that we can't change it. I mean, I'm just saying, if we just do it right the first time and just make it.
I thought that's so good.
No,
Yeah,
what I'm
that's right.
thinking about, like you said changing it after the fact, right?
No, we can just leave it C1, but then move some of the items on C1 to C2, and then that makes the current C1 neighborhood friendly.
That would be one option. Another option would be tonight to make it C1 with a daycare in C1. And in the future, make it C3. Make this a lot C3. It could be rezoned to that in the future.
Why don't we just do C3, go through the procedure, get it done, and just do it that way?
Well, that was my point in the last thing, that I thought.
Yeah.
It would be the right thing to do, but again, it doesn't really, whether you call it 1 or 3. I mean, you just have, you just want a commercial zone that has the right stuff in it, right? And that's kind of what you're saying.
What are those C1 uses that are?
You want me to read them all?
No, I know which ones they are. I mean, I guess it may inform a suggestion I have for you, if I understood which of the present C1 uses would be considered incongruous with this idea of C3. So, what are the common uses in C1?
Biggest ones are tavern. C1.
Liquor store.
Liquor stores, package sales only.
And those can't go there because they're less than 100 feet from the school property.
I don't know if even the stores, like wearing apparel stores, I'd be okay with those. To me, when I thought about it, I was thinking about businesses that would like to maintain their external appearance and stuff too, to kind of keep the residents happy. You know, things like, you know, dental office and doctor's office, a funeral home and stuff. Those places always keep their outside looking nice because they're always trying to get customers. So it's like, I mean, you know, we can think about things like that, but the big one would be liquor store taverns, that to answer your question.
But I think Pat mentioned in the past, the dentist office and doctor's offices fall under stuff.
I don't have your phone in front of me, but I don't remember what special uses fall where without looking it up. The reason I ask which uses are considered incongruous with a site like this is another consideration for you is you could also move uses from permitted to special uses, but leave them in C1, which would still make properties non-conforming if they don't have an awarded special use permit, but it wouldn't change like the bar zone. So you wouldn't have to rezone the bar. But if the bar ever ceased operations or the use change and someone wanted to start a new bar beyond having a liquor license, which you have to make available, you also have to get a special use permit. So an idea instead of having a third commercial district is if you think your C1 is largely residential friendly, with a few exceptions that might not be appropriate everywhere in C1, but in many places in C1, that would be another option, just make those trouble uses, special uses.
I mean, we do a third commercial district if we really thought we had 3 sets of things to split up. Like we really have this set we want here, and this set we want here, and this set we want here. I don't know that we have that much specificity, you know, that we don't be that specific. I mean, 2 is enough. I mean, I've looked at this over and over.
But on the other part of that conversation, we're thinking about changing C1 and C2 because of this one property. We're thinking about moving what we have in C1 to C2 for this specific property. So if we're making these changes based upon this one property, wouldn't it be easier just to do this? In my opinion, it'd be just easier to do a C3, leave the C1, C2 as is.
I kind of disagree. I think we're trying to fix our commercial zoning ordinances to match like reality. I mean, if you look at our ordinances now, I'm guessing they were copied from somewhere else. I mean, the description for C1 says central commercial district is composed of land to be used for a wide variety of commercial establishments. It should be located near the center of the community and adjacent to major streets. None of our commercial is near the center of our community. All of our residential is to the east. And all of our commercial is to the west. There's some residences in commercial districts. The residential to the south also. Yeah.
No, the commercial to the south.
Whitakers.
Yeah.
Outside of the community. But C1 isn't centrally located. I mean, I don't think our current commercial zoning ordinances match our community. I mean, we have things like hospital in here, right? Where did that come from? Did we ever have a hospital, or did we think one was going to show up? I think these were just copied from somewhere else, and I think they should be cleaned up.
Right, and I think that's what we have, my previous comment, we have to look at what our uses are, look at the village, how we want to expand. We're talking about sewer, we're talking about these other things. That's a different discussion, but I was just thinking on the C3, if we do that, or start the ball rolling on that, that would take care of this property so they can move forward.
Yeah, I'm just not seeing the need to have 3 commercial zones. I think we can do it. I mean, for our tiny little community, I think 2 should be plenty. We could have one, we say, you know, it should be closer to residences, and the other one should be the truck stop, like the highway, right? I mean,
Yeah, it was a truck stop.
yeah, I mean, I guess that might be industrial, I don't know. But, I mean, having 2 commercial zones seems like enough to me, and I don't know that we need to do a third. I'm still for changing this to C1, but
We can move pattern and, or we can create the special use so that we're not changing it on those. We can do change to special use under C1 for tavern and liquor store.
liquor store, packaged liquor zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can do that this evening.
Well,
Well, I mean,
yeah, you could direct me to prepare that ordinance. Your notice of public hearing was change permitted uses for C1 and C2. That'd be to remove those as a permitted use, would essentially be how it tethers to that. To be frank with you, in a perfect world, I'd rather republish, if you're gonna move those to special use, I'd rather republish those.
so we either have to move those to C2 tonight, or
Well, 2 things. One, if it is a will of the majority of this board, so if all 4 of you are on the same page, that we want to make taverns and liquor stores special uses in C1, go through the right process and bring that back separate from the rezoning, knowing that for this one site you're concerned about, no one can get a liquor license
Sure.
presently. And 2, to the extent a liquor license was sought, it requires a warrant issuance from the village. So I don't, in my opinion, or my advice, you don't bear a risk that a liquor store is gonna shoehorn in here by taking an extra month. Make sure we have the public notice being exactly on point to the change.
So we can still put daycare into C1, then ask for the ordinance and public hearing to do special uses for tavern and liquor store, and then also move to rezone that C1 tonight. We can do all.
The 2 things you could do tonight of the 3 you
Yeah.
said is you could,
But we can ask
direct me to prepare the ordinance to make daycare center permitted in C1. You could direct me to prepare the ordinance to rezone
Okay.
106 Pearl Street from R2 to C1.
And then we can make moves to do the special uses.
Correct, you could direct the planning commission to a public hearing on that matter. They hold a hearing, make a recommendation, then that come back before you. That sounds good.
And that takes care of.
And to be clear, what the idea of making taverns and liquor stores, especially taverns, because that's the case where you have existing properties in your C1 district that engage in that use. By making that a special use, you're not changing you don't have to go rezone those properties. So
Right.
their underlying zoning classification doesn't change. You just have, if one of your taverns ceased operating as a tavern, the use ended, and then somebody came back in and wanted to make a tavern, they'd have to do a public hearing and come back before you.
I mean, that kind of solves all the.
So Kevin, where are you at on 2 zones versus 3?
No, I'd rather have the C3 zone.
what would you want to put in C3?
I think you mentioned like dentist's office, doctor's office, is that one of the things? I mean, I don't have the list in front of me, but I mean, that's what we're kind of talking about, the flavor of the daycare of that, some minimal use. And that's a Monday through Friday, and our daycare is Monday through Friday, more often than not.
So I think the only things we have in town right now that are in the C1 are the 2 taverns and Bev's barber shop and salon. And then there's an empty, I think that one building is not being used between.
It's being remodeled.
Okay. Oh, it's gonna be the.
Yeah.
Other
The
thing.
ice cream place or the other one?
The old ice cream place is gonna be, what's it gonna be? A gaming parlor. So I mean, we have a huge listing here in C1 in the ordinance, none of which we have in town. Actually, bank is in C1, but that's sitting in a C2, according to the map I have. I don't know, I don't quite understand why we do a C3 instead of just fixing C1. Food stores is in C1, I think Casey's is a C2, but I guess it's a gas station too. So I don't understand that. I don't understand how it would benefit us to do a C3 and put like 3 things in it, as opposed to just take the C1 and put the 3 things in it.
I'm not sure which one of you started to say something about the look of the storefronts. Something I was just thinking about as far as maybe ordinance violation enforcement is some of those, like I think, I don't know if it's Kevin or Dave that mentioned doctor's offices, things like that would be trying to attract customers. So the likelihood of those types of commercial businesses being unsightly next to residential would be less than maybe repair shop or something that is more likely to have miscellaneous items sitting around. So I'm not sure if I'm not trying to push you to 2 or 3, but maybe something to consider, as I'm the lucky person that gets to deal with that would help with the residential potential complaints or concerns about a harsh or lack care of commercial property being next to some residential property.
That we have a commercial zone and we could make them, we could put something in there that says you want to have landscaping or something, is that something you do, or?
Yeah, some communities have, minimum landscaping requirements, in certain zoning districts, if you chose to. Yeah. Some also have buffers required between conflicting zoning districts, so where this district meets that, you have to put in landscape screening.
Benny Casey's is, I believe, got residential on 2 sides, north and south. Dollar General, I believe, has residential on the west side. Shiner Street is both businesses and residential spread out all over it. Are you getting complaints at all on any of the other locations in town where we have commercial and residential together? Kathy, did you get any complaints when you were a trustee? Good.
Right, so reminder that action tonight requires 48 votes.
Yeah.
Not right, stepping out of my role here, but been a lot of good discussion, which is seemingly to pause. Unless minds have changed or you believe continued debate is probable to change minds, anyone can make a motion. Any motion directly to prepare an ordinance will require 48, so anyone can make a motion.
Before we proceed, I want to clarify that if we make a motion it can be changed in the future.
Your action tonight would be to directly prepare, well, 2 things. 1, your action tonight would be to directly prepare an ordinance that would have to be adopted in the subsequent meeting. It would be nonsensical to directly prepare an ordinance and then not approve that ordinance, but until you actually vote to approve an ordinance that's physically in tangible form, the action is not final. Second is if you rezone to a district tonight, or you make a zoning change tonight to the zoning ordinance, that doesn't preclude future action on appropriate procedural safeguards in the future.
So we could ask the planning commission down the road to look at a C3 type plan and what businesses we might want to go in there.
Choose to do that now or in the
Do we have to make any motions tonight? Or if we make no motions, is all this just still on the table and we could discuss it at a future meeting?
Yeah, you don't have, I mean, if you probably were hyper technical in Roberts, without a motion to table, it would die for lack of action. As a practical matter, the way small towns implement Roberts, anyone could ask for these items on the agenda for subsequent meeting. You have the recommendation of planning commission expires per your ordinance 3 or 6 months after it's made, 90 days, so roughly 3 months. So if you make no motion tonight, you could take it up at a later.
If we make no motion, we can bring all this thing up at another meeting.
That's
We can put it on the agenda, say for next week.
Anybody ready to make a motion?
I don't think so, but I don't think it's gonna do any good.
Well, it doesn't have to be carried that way.
Oh, then we
But,
make
yeah,
a
people-
motion.
But if we don't, it doesn't have to be carried.
You can make a motion. If we had 3 ayes and 1 no, then the motion would not carry. That does not prevent us
Then we can
from
still do it in another meeting.
further action.
So we can just keep considering this until.
Well, it expires after 3 months, or when you have a vote that represents forward action, either accepting their recommendation or rejecting their recommendation, so you gotta have 4 yeas.
Okay,
I would suggest, and I didn't speak up last time too firmly on procedure, letting you guys track your own way. And probably in hindsight, maybe I should have to redirect the wording of the motion. But my suggestion is, if you don't believe there are 4 yea votes, and from your discussion, I don't believe there is, it would seem to only perpetuate confusion to put in that motion. Yeah, it's certainly your prerogative, and I'm not saying you can't, but if it's gonna be a 3-1 vote, and if you're certain that's the outcome, it would seem to not facilitate public understanding of the status to just vote for the sake of voting to see where we are.
Okay.
You know, but that's up to you, if you would like, and your date's correct, that you have opportunity to choose to make a motion tonight. If it votes 3-1, that is not sufficient votes to move forward because it is expending village funds. Now, we prepare the ordinance, and if the ordinance was even physically present here tonight, it would require 48 votes because it's an ordinance.
And at one time, I thought creating a 3rd class was bordering on spot zoning.
Well, if it was your will to create a 3rd class, one, we'd have to go back to the planning commission, make recommendations. You would also have to, beyond the recommendation, decide what properties to place in that district. You'd also have to decide permitted uses and special uses for that district. I would advise against having only 1 use, so I would suggest we need multiple uses. I would suggest it would be peculiar, if not unadvisable, to have only 1 property zone C3. So you need to, consider my advice would be, you need more than 1 C3 property, you need more than 1 use in C3. Otherwise, you have to spot zone.
What are the ramifications for spot zone? I mean, how's that different from, it's a residential versus special use?
So there's explicit statutory authority to create a special use, and case law is undistinguished that from spot zoning. So essentially, it's a creature that legislature allows, where legislature prohibits. It used to be called conditional zoning. So there's a distinction under law, both case law and statute. The risk of spot zoning is if someone were to litigate to challenge that decision, which there's a 90-day window after legislative act to make a zoning decision, that the person would have a probability of success that they could demonstrate it met the case law standard for what is spot zoning. A special use, there's clear statutory authority in your ordinance, so it's not able to succeed.
So you said a C3 with multiple things in it, with only 1 property account, could also be interpreted by a judiciary as spot zoning. So that's unadvisable too.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, with that information, what are your thoughts now?
That changes some things.
I feel like we could work with the residents to make C1 be this residential friendly zone. We have a whole bunch of stuff in C1 that doesn't exist. I just don't think our current ordinances were really written, you know, they must have been copied from somewhere. They actually fit like a town like Lexington very well, where there is a central commercial zone. They have some nice tavern, it's got ice cream, and then residences all around them. That's not how ours is, even though our ordinances act like that's how it is. I just feel like we should do some work on our commercial ordinances. And I think 2 commercial zones would be enough. And we can fix C1. And we, you know, we could put this property in C1, we need more commercial space. Put this in C1. And if we, you know, if we end up buying the land west of the library, great. Then this is, you know, contiguous with that, basically, you know, with library building is not a residence. You know, I mean, so, you know, even if we do what the planning commission has suggested would be a good thing to do, we end up with a contiguous commercial zone, in my opinion.
Doug or Maury, were either of you on the board when the zoning ordinances were all revised? I think it was 95 or 96.
96 is when this.
That's when most of these are. I think it started in 95. I want to say somebody, I think, that used to work for Cornwall or Bloomington, or was a zoning type of lawyer, helped us rewrite all the codes. So yes, I'm sure a lot of it's copied from someplace. Kevin, I'm waiting for you to wait.
Yeah, I know.
Put the pressure on.
I know. I mean, no, I mean, you know, unfortunately, this is a situation that the planning commission's in. We're all in this because it was not done, or it was not, I like doing things methodically in order, in sequence, and it's not to that point. So, I mean, I just don't like, I just don't like that. I mean, again, it was the whole thing, I mean, it's a difficult decision. I know it's a difficult decision for all of us up here to do it, but I mean, I'm thinking of the neighborhood, I'm thinking that we haven't come and said, hey, if we could just discuss, hey, this is what the planning and zoning, and this is what we think that thing's gonna be, and think it'd be a little bit easier. This is what should be in C1, C2, here, and here. I would have a better feel to say, okay, yes or no on that. At this point, I think I just have to say no, even still, because and go refer back to the special use, residential and special use for daycare. I mean, I know that conflict over there, but
Yeah,
I know. But I mean, without thinking things through all the way and what our business district is, the changes to that zoning, those, I'd rather have a thought out plan if we're gonna do that. And we're doing it because of this specific property, that's the catalyst for us changing it, so I don't like doing it based upon one.
But all zoning requests are from generally from a specific person, or, you know, changing residential to parcel like that.
And growth sparks change. So this was good at one time, so now we can make it better to accommodate current needs. And
Yeah, I'm just saying that we as a board, we haven't discussed that on a Hudson wide. We just keep talking about it because of this one property.
And that's correct, and that's one of the things we asked the planning commission to look at relative to the sewer study as far as where do we wanna see growth in Hudson? But that's not gonna happen for a while,
Right,
so.
Well,
We have good potential for growth right now.
right.
and just one point of clarification, one of the items that you sent the planning commission for recommendation was village-wide, looking at the permitted uses in C1 and C2, and making recommendation whether any changes are needed. Their recommendations in the negative, that the current permitted uses in C1 and C2 need not be changed, or that's a recommendation. So their public hearing, the opportunity for citizen comment, the notice in the Quill invited feedback village-wide on permitted uses C1, C2. That's not all zoning districts, but it does overlap more than you might anticipate with what you mentioned you'd like to hear.
Yeah, we seem to have a lot of consensus that it would be good to develop the commercial on the west side of town. This lot, there are no residential lots west of this property. This is on the west side of town.
But there's three residences north of that in the same location, west of town.
Yeah, and then just north of them, there's multiple C2 businesses.
Yeah.
Probably those businesses are all there, other than Casey's and the bank before the zoning. I don't recall when the bank got built, off the top of my head. I mean, that was residential at one time where the bank is too.
The ordinances say the bank's supposed to be C1, but the map I have says it's C2, so that's incorrect too.
No, all C1s are allowed in C2.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
yeah, anything in C1 is C2, okay.
I don't think I've changed my mind, Dave.
So just like the bank, I mean, the taverns could be a C2 also, right, especially if we move it, I guess.
I don't think we're getting anywhere.
All right, I think we're at a deadlock here. I want you to clarify again why you're not ready to rezoning.
Because,
If I may jump in, and certainly your, one consideration, just, and I'm gonna give you a break, it's slightly related to what you're gonna speak on. One, entirely up to you whether you answer that, I mean, you stand on what you've already stated. Second thing is, I know we talked about the lack of a motion, allowing this to continue forward to the next meeting. At a minimum, if you want it to be on a subsequent meeting agenda, you should probably express that tonight and express the date and time of that next meeting, so Allison can put it in the minutes. And that way there's public notice beyond the agenda of when someone could expect to see this.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Kevin.
No,
I
that's
thought you were
okay.
good with C3, but
well,
not
I mean,
for C1.
I was good with C3, thinking that it was a win-win, thinking that it would be, allow them funding for businesses, right? But then it allows the village to restrict the use for daycare. But from what Pat just said, that doesn't seem like a viable option either. So I was disappointed to hear that. So, I mean, and the other option, I think, changing from C1 to C2, changing things without really going through for this, changing it because of this property without really looking at the ramifications, pros and cons. We're not zoning people. I don't intend to be a police officer. I'm over police. I rely on Chief Connie to do the police work. I'm not a zoning person, so most of the people that would be doing the zoning would be Denny and the village attorney. So, I don't want to change things without knowing the ramifications of those and looking at ramifications throughout the village.
Do you have more homework you wanna do? Or do we need to, like? Cause you said we as a board need to kind of. Like,
I think if we're gonna change things from different classifications, in my opinion, we need to look at the ramifications, pros and cons. What does that do with current businesses? Where do you want the C1 and C2, the west of town, like Joe said, if we develop? What is the overall plan? What we want to develop and where we want to put it. We have township land within the village that's currently owned by the township. So what happens if they sell that again and they want to put a commercial piece in there? So I mean, I think it's things like that we need to look at, as well as, you know, well, that's what my concern is just a change of the zoning.
We did some of that legwork. I mean, at the last meeting, we had a concern of if we move something to C1, C2, to change real estate taxes, and the answer is no. That's not something that's, you know, I mean, that would have to be county-wide or something, right? If we as Hudson were required to have certain things in C1 for tax and stuff, that's just not how it works. So it's really just our ordinances and what is written in our ordinances. And, you know.
But let me just tell like analogy to the sewer study, right? Oh, you know, I know the best effort, all the plans go out there. Oh, there's no property taxes are going with Midward. Why is that? Now Greg has to go back and research that. That's what I'm saying. There's things that come up that I don't know. I want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. And that's what my concern is. And for us to change it because of this, without looking into all that, I guess from my perspective.
Change it as in putting daycare into C1, or change it as in changing any of the things that are already currently in C1. So you don't, okay, so your concern is.
So what I'm concerned, like,
Yeah.
my concern is to keep it residential feel, right? To do that. So I thought we were gonna change things out of C1 or put things in C1, so it's still the residential flavor, right? That's the whole idea. So it's like, okay, so with everything else, we have C1, we have discussions about, Joe just asked about the bank. In C1, why is C1 in there? Kathy responded, oh, that's because C1 can go to C2. We don't know everything about zoning. We're still learning, so I'm afraid that we're gonna make a decision and without knowing.
By putting daycare into C1.
If we put,
or rezoning this to C1 with everything else in C1. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So there's concern with putting daycare into C1 with everything else that's in there, not knowing how to change what we need to in there, what that's gonna do.
To all the existing businesses, everything, all the different lots and parcels within the village.
We know it's not gonna change the taxes.
I know.
Would you consider then, you know, tonight, putting it here in C1 and putting this lot in C1, and then over time, you figure out the rest of the things? Are you?
No, I mean, I don't.
That's the main concern.
I don't agree with that, because then we're doing things, we're not doing things step by step methodical. What happens, we find something that we can't change it, or something happens, who knows, I'd rather do it methodically, researching everything ahead of time and making the changes.
Yeah, that's what I thought we were doing from the last
Right,
meeting.
yeah.
That was why I voted the way I voted in the last meeting, because I wanted to get it done the right way, but the planning commission has spoken that they really don't want it commercial at all.
Based on what they can look at.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're asking, yeah, is what I thought we were doing the last thing.
Same. Yeah.
I understand the need to be methodical, but I'm not sure what else we need to consider for this lot and for a daycare.
Well, I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Sure.
If any trustee needs perspective between now and a future meeting, to the extent issues come back up, I'm certainly glad to answer questions and provide advice, coordination with any. One thing for you to consider, just trying to identify where middle ground exists. I'm still not sure there's been a conclusive prerogative stated on any of the permitted use changes or where kind of everybody's wishes are. So if, someone wanted to work on specific changes, like if we were to make C1 residential friendly with 6 uses that should be moved elsewhere, this is how we do it. I'm glad to advise specifically any proposed change.
And then maybe like, okay, so like maybe that's a good point, that's a good starting point. And then, okay, then anybody that is actually within that C1 classification, we talk to businesses that are in that C1 classification, and do they have a problem with that? Maybe that's part of it too, is that, hey, if we're changing the zoning, right? Like an existing business that's C1, and then say, this is what you could go in there as, now we're reducing it to this. Does that affect that?
And they would have had legal notice to participate in the planning commission meeting, express that. That doesn't mean you couldn't choose to give those beyond legal notice, but anyone with a concern would have had the minimum legal notice, an opportunity to participate and express concern in the planning commission hearing.
But if we're gonna rezone, any other lot would be increasing what they can put there, not lessening. I mean, if we wanted to move Caverns to C2 and rezone Tavern lot C2, then they could put a whole bunch more stuff there, not less.
And how will that affect future plans? For our development though?
I can't show the map because it's not the thing, but I mean, our C1 district right now has industrial to the west, some industrial to the south actually too, C2 to the north, and then residential to the east. I mean, so changing anything in C1 to C2, it would be contiguous with this other C2 we have, which has Casey's and the bank and everything really.
So would it make more sense, I mean, if we change in C1, okay, if we're changing C1 and C2, or C1 can go into C2, but if we're changing C1, we would know.
You might have to start and repeat that again, right?
Yeah, so if we know the changes to C1 and C2, well, if we made changes to them, would it be good to know how we're gonna use those, or where we're gonna be putting those in the future for the village, and how that's gonna affect it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. Do we make C1, have this stuff close to residences and C2, just out by the highway? That's the question.
Yeah.
I think it is.
Okay, I would like to suggest we put this on the agenda for next Wednesday.
Yeah, can we put it on, we don't have to do a week's notice to put something on the agenda?
No, yeah, 48 hours.
Oh, 48 hours.
I'm not sure when Aaron and Phil get back. I would like to see us have another meeting later this week if I knew they were gonna be here.
Aaron said to me the funeral was today, so I don't know how long it's
And
going.
he's on vacation after that,
Okay.
he said, so I don't know how long after that.
When it starts.
He told me that, if I remember correctly, that he was going to the funeral, coming back for one day, and then it's gonna be gone for at least a week. So I don't think his availability in the next 10 days is very much.
And I just wanna make sure that the type of review you wanna do is not a 6-month or a 1-year review.
It's
I'm not understanding what y'all wanna get done, so What's your opinion?
Dave, I don't know, I'm not a zoning person, I have no idea.
Okay, but you understand, you just talked about doing a review, never mind, okay.
I'm not a zoning person, I don't know what a review would entail.
Okay, so it's clear we're not gonna get a 4 votes tonight to do either way. How about if we set up a meeting in 2 weeks, Aaron should be back, Phil will be back. See if we have availability, of all the trustees, or enough trustees that we would have more availability, get feedback from Aaron and Phil both.
1.5 suggestions, maybe, that aid you as you move forward. One suggestion would be, Kevin's expressed his material to him what uses would be in C1. So if a proponent, someone seeking to, who's in favor of making changes to C1 uses to make it this residential friendly commercial district, we're to endeavor to make recommendations and share those with the other trustees or with myself. I'd be glad to then answer any questions Kevin has on the legal ramification of changes. But I think, and I'm not speaking, I don't intend to speak for Kevin, but based on what I've observed of statements, if in order for there to be some assessment of whether the change is advisable, we might need to define really specifically what the proponents are seeking to change, give Kevin the opportunity to seek information and desires to evaluate the merits of the change.
Since there's already been a public hearing on these topics, the reclassification is of the lot, the assignment of daycare to C1 or the residential, and the possible movement of businesses between classes. Those could go on the agenda without another special hearing or anything.
Yes, subject to one minor point of clarification, that you can change permitted uses C1 and C2 if the proponent's recommendation is to make uses new special uses we wanted. One of the ideas I suggested was, if you're not in favor of rezoning property that has taverns or liquor stores, or if you are opposed to taverns and liquor stores moving C1 to C2, because you're opposed to having to change the zoning classification of your existing taverns, you could consider making taverns a special use in C1, thereby not needing a change in the zoning for C1, and making taverns at least an available use, so special for any newly created uses. If that is your will, we need to take that back to planning commission. That's not within the scope of the hearing. Anything else with, making daycare centers special use in R2, making daycare center permitted in C1, changing permitted uses in C1 or C2, and rezoning 106 Pearl to C1 are all matters that can have a standing recommendation on. And within the next 90 days, you can act as a board level without it.
Just a general question, I mean, I've looked at this a ton of times now. I don't know how lawyers come up with stuff, I mean, the list is just weird of what we have in C1, I mean, things that have never been here, we probably never have. How did we choose to put those in? We just thought they might show up one day. I mean, something like antique shop, one of them says accessory uses, is that like accessories, like, I don't know what that is.
Accessory uses, things like garages when you have a house, so it's something complicated.
Oh, okay. Clinics, drugstores, electrical household appliance stores, I was questioning myself, well, how did we even put those in there? You just randomly come up with some things you think might show up and you put them in, is that how it's done?
There's been an antique store here already.
Has it?
Yeah, I can't, I mean, I'd only be speculating as to the origins of your ordinance. Usually, when we speak of zoning ordinances, we attempt to find defined uses and schedule them as permitted or special in a zoning district. This is actually a peculiarity that you define daycare center as a permitted use or as a use, but have not scheduled it anywhere in your ordinances. So that's an oddity. But normally you don't just zone what's here, you zone what could come, and you try to use categories and classifications for uses that will adapt to future developments, admitting that many of those definitions are antiquated, used in many codes. You could probably find haberdashery in a whole lot of zoning ordinances in the state of Illinois, so.
Okay, so special uses generally do with businesses, is there a possibility of assigning a special use to a lot? The parcel?
Well, a lot without a, you could award a special, you generally award a special use to a parcel. And that permits a specific type of use. So you could award a special use, for example, to 106 Pearl Street. In terms of whether that runs with the land or is specific to the owner, it depends on your ordinance. I believe there's I don't want to speak as what your ordinance says without looking at it. I know that question came up early on, and I'm not sure your ordinances have a clear answer to that, but.
All right, so it's 2 weeks from tonight would be June 6th and 14, June 20th. Aaron should be back. I will check with Phil. How many of the trustees are available on June 20th?
That was the same.
Thank you. How about June 21st? We don't need Greg here for this, so June 21st, are we?
Yes.
Nelson, are you back?
Yeah.
Okay. Lynn,
I mean, it can be.
okay, let me, you got a better date?
Not that week, no, because I'll be out of town then.
I don't wanna, you miss vacation or anything.
Right. No, I'll be in town that night, but we're leaving the next day.
Okay, so I'll put it tentative for June 21st. We'll post it. Allison, the 4 items on the agenda are the 4 things that were the agenda for the last public hearing for the planning committee. We'll have it 7 o'clock here at the police department. And that'll be our agenda. If Phil and Aaron can't make it, then we'll cancel that and just go and see what happens. But they should hopefully both be back by then, so. Kevin, what do we need to help you to figure out what your questions are?
I know, I think more discussion, maybe with Joe or Lynn, maybe even before that, to look at those. Just have some idea about what should go into C1, what should go into C2, and look at the zoning map within the village of Hudson.
Okay, but we can't do any changes for that. We're just concentrating on the daycare lot or the 106 Pearl Street. I think that's the address.
Yeah.
And whether or not a daycare would go there. Well, I guess we are, because we are looking at uses of C1 and C2, which would be incidental, but the priority is looking at that lot.
Yeah.
And where
I
do
don't
we
think
think
I have anything else to add. I'm sorry I was abrupt to you, abrupt with you earlier, but I mean, again, I don't know, like, I think what I'm looking at was I don't know without looking at it and seeing that and whatever I said before, that's kind of what I don't think that's where I'm at.
Will you
So,
contact
and
them and me?
and when you're asking me how long the review would be, I don't know, you know, if there's a public hearing, something that has to occur, you know, when you're asking me about the review of those things, if it's gonna be 6 months or a year, I had no idea how long that would be. So,
I'm not
yeah.
sure what you were all looking at. That's
Yeah,
why.
so, I mean,
Yeah.
I was hoping the C3 would be a go, and that could be a win-win, but it's not, so.
Okay, so June 21st will be our next meeting. Allison, you got start for the agenda,
I will,
please.
do you have that? Could you email that to me or just paper copy?
I wrote some notes on it, but nothing that you can't have.
Make a copy. Okay. Any of the trustees have any additional discussion on the public hearing items?
7 PM on the 21st.
7 PM. Pat, if you're available, that'd be great.
I'll double check my schedule, but do my best for you.
Okay, next item under zoning is swearing Bobby L to the planning commission.
You have to recommend him.
Yep,
do
you
you
have to recommend and vote.
Yeah.
You can't vote on.
Somebody make a recommendation, or I'll make a recommendation. We appoint Bob Yell to the planning commission, and we'll need a vote, a motion, and a vote. So would somebody like to make that a motion?
I make a motion to swear in Bobby L on the planning commission.
A second.
So we have a motion and a second, roll call vote,
Dave Brulog,
yes?
Joe Boyd.
Yes.
Kevin Kelly.
Yes.
Lynn Norris.
Yes.
All right, Allison, please go ahead and swear Bob in.
I, Bobby Hill,
I, Bob Gale,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge
that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of planning commission member
the duties of planning commission member
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Bob. Next on our agenda is police department, Kevin.
Okay. Before I start that, Sarah has passed around the consolidated capital investment report by fund as of May 31st, 2023. And it gives us a snapshot of what our investments, our cash balance, checking, sweep, money market, ending balance is by fund as of May 31st. And it shows that, I think that, again, that interest rate, these interest rates are not to be disclosed. Disclose that, but to the far right, that is what our checking sweep is currently making right under the interest rate column. And then the second line is a total certificate of deposits. So Sarah worked with the bank to invest these CDs. So at those 3 month, 6 month, and 12 month rates by fund. And she's going to provide us, she said she'd be providing us with this report on a month-end basis for each month. And if there's questions, she said she would answer those.
Sarah and Kevin, I know you guys put a lot of time in on this, so I appreciate what you're doing. Sarah, this is gonna be a really good report for the board to get a quick financial picture of where we're at with our investments, so.
I think it'd be helpful with going capital projects and things like that, just looking at, when we have to vote for anything, we can at least see in a snapshot what our investments are and what we're getting inside. I think what I would, again, I know that, I think somebody said Sarah has the power to do this, but my suggestion was, and Sarah and I talked about it, to review these and see what after 3 months and 6 months, the reinvestment will be and the rates that we receive at that time, so the board can see that, what we're getting. But I mean, I didn't do the calculation, but we are, compared to last year, we're getting quite a bit more than multiple more.
That, excuse my ignorance, but where does all the interest go? Does it go like into the CD or do we get it like cash into an account?
It goes back and Sarah actually, it's paid, it's reinvested back into the CD, so it renews. So at the, like if it's a 3 month term, we get interest at that end of the 3 month period, and then it's reinvested as principal into for the next period at the current rate at that time.
It's not money we should grab and spend this year, we should reinvest it, you're saying, okay.
Well, no, what we did though, the way that we, Sarah and I would kind of work with this, is that we did it over 3, 6, and 12 months. So if there's some expenditure or some issue, we could actually withdraw the money and use it for our cash reserve. But if you see up on top, we have a current, and we have a target goal minimum fund balances for each of the funds. So that's kind of a ballpark, what we kind of did as a best guess for each fund. So like we have a working cash of general fund, $150,000. That's what our goal is. If you look at what we have in that general fund now is 161. So the whole idea is after a 3-month term, if we have excess of what we really need, we would reinvest it add it to a CD in 3 months and hopefully get the higher rate at that time.
So that 161 is like sitting in their cash in case we need it right now, you're saying?
Exactly right, exactly. So there's revenue coming in, expenses going out. So basically, we're at that 161 there.
Okay.
And then, and I did find out like the other part of there's an audit fund. This is the way that Sarah has to break it up in her spreadsheet and allocate it. So I did, there's a DUI and drug, I guess those are police related for police purposes. So if we need to draw funds and if Mark and I feel like there's a need, we can draw funds from those for police purposes. We haven't talked about that yet, but is that correct, Mark?
Yes.
Okay.
And yes, they can only be spent for certain items.
Okay.
That's why it has to be kept separate.
Yeah, this is nice and really clear. It's always been a mystery to me since I've been on the board, so this is
Well,
really nice.
got feedback from Dave and from Sarah, I know something else, but we kind of tweaked it even today to make it clear, so. Okay. Next, there's no more questions about that. The next item on our agenda is, and I think I'm gonna just talk about the second one first. We discuss and vote on possible use of hiring and utilizing part-time police in addition to the current chief full-time officers. Utilizing part-time police that doesn't overlap with current daytime hours. Do that. When I put this, I didn't realize we only had 3 trustees. So I think I'm gonna pull the vote on it. Dave, can we add that?
Yeah.
Can we add that to the next meeting in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
To discuss when we have a full board, but we can discuss, now.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a comment on that. I mean, we've discussed
Sure.
this. I still don't understand how we decide that issue. It would be clear to me if we were having fights all the time at the bars and we needed more cops. I don't understand how we decide that we need more police coverage. So if anybody that has thoughts on that, I'd love to hear it.
I think I know that there's some residents that come to me and said that there are some things going, like maybe on a Friday night, Saturday night, driving fast, they're maybe walking through the streets, and when they can call the county to do that. I thought this is maybe a compromise. Instead of getting that 3rd officer, we could actually do that. I know that we have the funding, and that's the other point I want to mention. We typically funded 22.5 for part-time police, but with the understanding, I want to get the consensus for the full board to go in, and that's why I don't want to vote on it now with only 3 trustees.
Remember, we talked about it, there was the potential when Mark, that this part-time could step up and then become one of the full-times too. We already have it in place. That was one that.
Then- I didn't hear that.
It was, when we were talking about in budget meetings, it was the part-time, when Mark retires again. That part-timer would be there to potentially step up and take one, the full-time position. That was one of the benefits that we foresaw of beginning to talk about hiring another.
Yeah, but I think right now is what we're thinking about, is actually, we can't have a 24/7, a town of 1,800 people on that. So I think what Chief Cotty and I discussed is that it would be Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, possibly from 6 to 12 midnight. And times, 3 nights. Again, we have to hire somebody, we have to find somebody that would want to work part-time for that. It's, you know, it just, whether or not we can't even do that, it might not be possible, but I think what I thought it would be to pay somebody part-time, cover those hours, and I think he had 2 exceptions, if I correct, I think they were working Halloween and garage sale days. So that would be the 2 exceptions to the Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. So I thought that was reasonable to do that. And again, you know, summer months, maybe not so much. I think, you know, again, maybe some weeks, I think it's, Mark said, it won't be 52 weeks a year, but.
Right, there'd be some weeks that you probably wouldn't utilize them because they're slow times. The activity is not. It goes up and down. So it would depend on your person. And those hours are just something, well, Kevin, I don't want overlapping hours. So I said, well, 6 to 12 would not be, but it may only be 7 to 12. It depends. I mean, you're hiring a part-time, they might already have a full-time job. A lot of part-time police. Help I know that we're full-time for State Farm, we're part-time police officer. They do it at night and on the weekend. So the main thing is we're not gonna have it during the day.
Mark, could you address some of Joe's questions on what type of incidents or issues would we have on those Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, or things that we could address?
Well, I think we want to have more coverage just from, especially some of the bar, Kenny and Judy have expressed that they'd like to see more of a police presence sometimes in the evening. Also, it'd be nice to have the more riskier time is when you've got closing of Dollar General. Obviously, you can't be there. That's the advantage. It's preventative. If you were to ask, I mean, you always ask the question, well, does anything happen between those hours? Sometimes no. But it's one of those things you want to be able to prevent presence. Makes logical sense. If you're gonna do it, those are the hours that you do it. Not, you know, we're not gonna hang with like Sunday or something like that. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And that's even if I can find someone.
Yeah, just your comment, Joy, I know from people that have called, you can't depend on the county to show up. We're kind of on our own, the county's light staff do. And if they have other calls going on, you know, you call them, they run into up. I mean, if we really need or want coverage, I think we have to supply it, but.
Well, I think the county has done a great job. I mean, just since I've been on the board since October, I've witnessed and understood what the county has done here too, in some calls here. So I understand that. So, I mean, but they do have a large county to control. So I think on things like this, just as they do their, I mean, I'm home so I can see Chief County and Officer Lane do their patrols around Hudson, go down my street, doing that on a routine basis. I think, I mean, at least people know they're there, and I think it's a resource too. So, I mean, and like kind of what Chief County said, you know, it could be preventing some things, maybe not major, but just some minor disturbances even. I think it'd be worth it. Like again, I mean. I
Get it on the agenda.
Oh, yeah, okay. The second thing I have is discuss and vote on dash cam body camera vendor contract. Like Chief Cuddy mentioned during his presentation, is the Axon and Motorola are the only 2 vendors that we have. That's the only ones that do that. There is a cost. There is, when you look at the total cost is kind of eye-dropping, but when you consider it over a 5-year period, it isn't as bad. The upfront costs for 5-year contract for Axon, and this is Axon, 5-year cost is $60,221.68. That is both 3 body cameras and 3 dash cams. And a technical software to store it, retrieve it. Versus the Motorola $57,692. There is a qualitative difference between the two. I sat through the Axon demonstration with Chief Cotty and Officer Lane, and it was impressive what they could do. What I found from Chief Cotty too is that the county uses that. I think Normal and Bloomington use it. or
Normal
does.
uses Axon, the state's attorney uses evidence.com, which is their software for
Okay.
storage. And so the Axon is a preferred system that will sync well with other agencies. For example, we do work with the county quite a bit. And not only does the county come in here to handle calls, but we also go out to the county to handle calls to help the county out. Sometimes they're short. When we both show up, the deputy and myself, those Axon cameras, because they're both Axon systems, they will both sync up together. And you know what I'm talking about there. So it is a preferred system, and the state's attorney already has an account with it. So when I need to have show a video to the state's attorney for court purposes, I can just tell them, okay, it's this date and time. They can go in, log in, and they can go ahead and download the video. Right now, it's pretty cumbersome to do that. The issue is we have to go to body cams, and I want to take advantage of the fact that there's a couple grants that I can write, and I can write them now as soon as the board approves it. I can't write the grant until there's approval, because it won't guarantee money. And I want to get that in as quickly as possible before the money leaves, because you don't know if it's going to stick. So.
And so like if you see on the Axon quote, they have 2 separate quotes, so I think they split that out, so it makes it easier to.
Right,
write the
one is a
grant
body
because of
cam quote, one is the.
Because of the hardware versus the software and the technical, et cetera. So for the first year, August 2023, 8,050.72 is requested. Well, before I get into that, well, I just continue on that. So 8,050.72 is required for the first year. And then for the next year, it drops down. But it does then, but after a 5-year period, it's 23,368.48. And then for the dash cams, because of the changes before they can actually install it and have it available for us, we're looking at March of 2024. So it still will be this fiscal year, but that's 17,678 for the first year. And that's a total of 5 years, 36,853.20. I believe that, I mean, it's expensive, but I'm looking for the quality and what it doesn't have any gaps in the upload of the information, the edits. I think, Mark, you mentioned something about FOIA requests.
Yeah.
And it allows you to edit that and retrieve that information relatively easily.
Yes, when there's a FOIA request, I can't just give raw video to citizens, or even to, we may get requests, and we get them all the time from insurance companies. Accident reports, criminal damage, something happens to a house or whatever, and we have it on camera. I have to be able to go in and blur out certain things, license plate numbers, other people's faces, children's faces, and things like that. And the software that Axon uses for that is much more user-friendly than the Motorola. Currently, if we were to get, when we do get a request for video, I have to actually manually go in and manipulate that data. And for example, like today, we had an 8-minute video that we needed to send. It was about 3 hours worth of work to get that ready to go to send down. Whereas under the new system, it'd probably be a 10-minute thing. Because their software automatically, as you go through the video, it's AI. It will automatically focus in on a person's face, push a button, blur it. It recognizes the scene and what you need to do. It's pretty smart software. A little scary. I mean, it's like it's thinking for you, but it is AI. So it makes it a lot easier to go with that.
So Kevin, what's your recommendation?
Well, my recommendation is to go with Axon, even though it's more expensive than the Motorola quote. Motorola quote was set $57,692, so it's still within $3,000 of that. But I believe Axon is the better vendor, so in this instance, I think it's worth the extra $3,000 to go with Axon.
Is the term the same, like the same length, or was the Axon a year less?
Axon is about $3,000 more total.
Like time, like
I'm sorry,
over.
5 years.
They're both over
years,
5,
yeah.
okay.
So we're comparing apples and apples.
Yeah, gotcha.
It just, the Axon split out the body cam and the squad car. separately.
When they're pretty close apples to apples, they're not exactly because they're different companies.
I understand, I just thought I thought one was like 6 and one was 5.
No.
Yeah.
One of the big advantages to Axon that I didn't mention is that at the 3-year mark or 2.5-year mark, halfway through the contract, you will get all the body cameras replaced. That's just part of it. And then at the end of the 5-year period with the video and the squad car cameras, those get replaced. That's part of the contract. So when you leave with the 5-year contract, you've been upgraded by the end, and Motorola doesn't do that. So it's kind of nice that they actually do that.
Okay, so we have a motion to go with the 5-year Axon contract. Is that correct?
Okay, should I make the motion?
Like you did.
Oh, okay.
No, go ahead, make it.
Okay, make the motion to go with the Axon 5-year contract for $60,221.68.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second to go with Axon. Allison, did you get the amount?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if it has to be, but for the first year for this fiscal year, the amount is gonna be $25,729.60. Paid in August, and then again in March of next year. I just say, it's not again, it's 25,000 total. 17,678 is in March of next year, 8,050.72 is in August 23. Should I say that a little bit faster?
No.
Sorry, Bob.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions or discussions? Not, take a vote. Allison?
Dave Britlog.
Yes.
Joe Boyd.
Yes.
Kevin Kelly.
Yes.
Lynn Norris.
Yes.
Kevin, did you have anything else?
No, that's all.
Okay. Joe, water, you got anything for tonight? Okay. Next was trustee Aaron, playground equipment. Denny, you wanna fill us in on that?
I'm getting kind of sleepy. But I handed you all the stuff. Aaron has that. I plan to take down the part that is broken, the spiral slide up there soon in the next couple of weeks. In the next 2 weeks, I'm probably not going to have any time to pursue putting up anything. So this is some options that I came up with as far as one, it's not really an option to get something and attach it, another slide and attach it directly to the slide that's broken. The spiral slide up there. So we need to come up with a way to basically get off of that platform or terminate that platform some way back to the ground. And that's where on your front page, that kind of Spider-Man cargo net thing.
Which part?
This is up the ballpark, the orange spiral slide.
Is it blocked off right now?
Yes, kind of. It keeps getting unblocked off, but yeah, and it's not super dangerous, but it is cracked in several spots, and we looked into repairing options, and that's just not gonna be very feasible. So we want to remove it, and basically looking at buying this kind of cargo net thing to attach to it. It's unbelievably difficult to get prices back from some of these companies. So we've looked into possibly making some of this ourselves. So there's the first couple pages are pictures of things, of a way to get off of that platform. Then, since we'll be removing the slide that's up there, Aaron and I's thought was to put a freestanding slide back up. Because the initial thought of attaching a slide, we can't get matching companies to agree to attach. So then we do have some prices, as you scroll through the pages, pictures of, do we want a bigger slide or a double slide or taller slide, etc. I gathered that all for him, and his opinion to me was, whatever Denny you think and want. I'm not a big leaning toward one way or the other. So at this point, I'm just gonna take it down and you talk about it next month or in your weekend meeting in 2 weeks. You'll have this information to sleep on.
I'll do some market research.
All right, thank you, Jenny. Does anybody have any questions for Jenny on the playground stuff? All right, guess you take it down during the day when there's no kids up there, so they don't beat you up. They're gonna be disappointed because they use that all the time. So. Good. All right, next on the agenda is liquor commissioner report, which is me. I have nothing to report. We have nothing to move into closed session on. So does anybody have any other business for tonight? Not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We have a second.
Okay.
Allison, roll call.
Dave Rulock.
Yes.
Joe Boyd.
Yes.
Kevin Kelly.
Yes.
Lynn Norris.
Yes.